Hello everyone and welcome to today's video where we're going to take a look at the Panasonic UB450 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Now I recently did a first impressions video on this coming from an Xbox Series X and compared the two. If you are in a similar situation or that video will be interesting to you, I will put a link of it down in the description and a little pop-up card here. But in this video I wanted to kind of review the player after it being my sole player for the last sort of month or two. I use it a couple of times a week and I wanted to share my thoughts on it with you. Now I know this has recently been released in the US and it's been out in the UK for a couple of years actually. But I want to talk about why I chose this player over the more expensive Panasonic 820. There is a Panasonic 150 and I think a 420 as well. They do not support Dolby Vision, so this is kind of, if you're looking for Dolby Vision, HDR, all that good stuff, this is the player that you want to start looking at. And the 820 may be the better player for you, but I will go through a little comparison at the end. First up, looking at the player itself, as you can see, it's quite small, it's quite lightweight. On the front here we have our disc tray, we have no digital display. We have a USB port, our IR sensor for our remote, and a power that lights up red when you turn it on. Up top we have a power button and a eject button. These buttons are, again, a little bit kind of plasticky, they don't feel that premium, but this player does retail for £200 here in the UK, but you can pick it up for about 170 in some places. Over on the back we have our power. We have our Ethernet port. Now this player does not support Wi-Fi, so if you want to use any of the networking features or need to update the firmware, you do have to connect it via the Ethernet cable. We've got two HDMI ports, one that says a video out, one that says audio out. So this allows you to split your audio and video. I think for the majority of people, like I myself, I just use the video out, which does video and audio. But if you have a high-end setup with a really great receiver and you want to split the two to have the purest quality for both of them, then you have the option to there. So that's nice. We've got a digital out, and that is it for the player itself. In the box, you also get this remote. Now this is my sort of one gripe with this particular player. This remote feels cheap. It's plasticky. It does the job fine, but by no means is this a nice remote. It's kind of like those remotes you get with like those knockoff streaming boxes, so really not nice that. Now when it comes to playing 4K discs, I have had no issues with the player itself. It's played everything that I've put in it and it's played it very well. Everything has looked fantastic. Now when it comes to 4K Blu-rays, obviously there's a number of factors that are going to affect things. Your TV, if you're talking of sound, your audio setup, but also like the transfer of the 4K itself. But on the whole, any 4K that I know looks great has looked fantastic in this player, and I've had no issues there. I don't use it that much for Blu-rays, but obviously here I've just loaded up Lord of the Rings on 4K. I'm just gonna jump over to the Blu-ray version. We're not doing a comparison here, they're completely different transfers, but Blu-rays do look really nice in this player as well. It does not upscale the Blu-rays like the 820 does. I will come to that at the end when I compare the two, but Blu-rays still look really good. Another thing I often use this player for is to play CDs. Again, no issues with any of the CDs that I put into it. Sounds great. You can connect the you can put high-res music files, so things like your FLAC files and that, on a USB stick and connect it to the player, and it will play them for you as well. I haven't personally done that, but that's another nice thing, so you can get your high-res audio from this too. It also supports home networking. You're going to need that Ethernet cable connected for that because it does not have Wi-Fi, but again, you could stream your files onto that. One other quick thing to note, when you connect the USB, if you've got video files on there, it also supports Atmos embedded video files as well as DTS:X audio, which is another nice thing. And I don't think, again, don't quote me on this, but I don't think the 820 can do that. So there is actually a win with this one if that's the route you want to go down. The menu itself on the player is extremely basic. Here it is, you've got your different options here. I'm just going to quickly pop into the settings. I personally didn't need to tweak anything here. Everything was set up correctly. There's very little that you can go in and change picture quality wise. I mean, there's a few options, but I think for most people it will be as is or as it is here on the screen. You can obviously go in and do your firmware update here. I did a firmware update on this as soon as I got it. Took a couple of minutes, connected the Ethernet cable to do it and had no problems, nice and straightforward. So why did I choose the 450 over the 820? Well, first of all, there is a price difference here in the UK. This one, as I mentioned, is around £200, whereas the 820 is £300 to £350. So that's quite a jump, but what do you get extra for it? First of all, the 820 upscales your Blu-ray discs, and I've heard it upscales them very, very well. I don't have one to compare it to. As I mentioned, the Blu-ray that I watched, a couple of Blu-rays that I've watched, sorry, have been, they've looked fine. Not as good as the 4K discs, but again, that can vary on the transfer as well. But if you have a massive Blu-ray collection and you want your Blu-rays to look better than ever, the 820 might be the option for you. Yes, it is a little bit more expensive, but you're going to get that upscaling capabilities from the player. Another consideration is the HDR optimizer. Now, the HDR optimizer is something you get in the 820, and it will help boost your HDR content. There's a couple of arguments here. Some people will argue that this is not the creator's intent, it's changing the image of how the creator wanted, so they would steer away from it. Some people say it's a really nice feature to have, particularly on older TVs. If you've got a new TV, so one of the new LG C series, the G series, or anything in the last year or two, their kind of dynamic tone mapping and HDR optimizer settings that are built into the TV do a really good job now. So for me personally, I didn't feel the need for that HDR optimizer, but that might be something that you need to think about if you've got an older TV and you really want to sort of boost that HDR. There is a much more detailed video on how that HDR optimizer works that I think HD TV Test have done. I will put a link to it in the video. It's about 4 years old now, so again, it doesn't apply to the sort of modern tech on TVs, but if you want to check it out, it will be down in the description. As mentioned earlier, this does not have Wi-Fi built in, which the 820 does. There is also no smart apps built into this player, so your Netflix, etc., which the 820 has. Now, me personally, I use Apple TV for everything, and pretty much everything I buy has smart apps built into it, so I didn't need that from this player. There is a few cosmetic difference between the 820 and the 450. The 820 does look and feel much more premium, it's much bigger, it has the digital display on the front, and the remote is a lot nicer. So if budget is not really an option to you and you just want the absolute best 4K Blu-ray player from Panasonic, and probably from any of the companies, I personally believe it's Panasonic do the best ones, get the 820, you'll be fine, you'll get those extra features that I've just talked about, you'll get a better built player, get a nicer remote, and you'll be happy. If you don't want to spend that much, around the £200 mark, and maybe you're upgrading a much older player for Dolby Vision and better capabilities, or you're coming from a console, this is a really nice player. I have no regrets in buying it. I use it all the time. It plays discs fine. I've had no issues with freezing, except when I leave it on pause for more than 10 minutes. Sometimes when I come back, I hit play and the movie will stutter for a couple of seconds and then it'll be fine. Noise-wise, it's pretty much silent. Towards the end of some films, like particularly Lord of the Rings that I watched the other day, it does start to hum a tiny little bit. It's not distracting at all, but it's not perfectly silent. And I think, again, the 820 has a fan built in as far as I'm aware, so that might keep it cooler. So this one might be getting a little bit warm, and hence that kind of whirling sound that I can hear. But it's really not a deal breaker. I barely could hear it, and it wasn't distracting at all. As always, thank you for watching. If you found this video at all useful, please do give it a like down below. And if you love all things physical media, a subscription to the channel will be much appreciated. And I hope to see you soon.